Namaskar. Hello and welcome to Weekly Global Insights, episode 306. A shout out to our viewers to like this program so it can reach its maximum potential. We will also be airing our Tamil version of WJI with more languages to follow, so stay tuned. Today is the 30th of January, Sunday, and here's what happened last week. But before we start reading our news items, as always, let's welcome our co-host, Sree 𝗣𝗂𝘂𝘀𝘀. Sree, namaskar and welcome to PGurus channel.
Namaskar, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whichever part of the world you are in, and wonderful to be back. And we are now resuming with the weekly global insights roundup and, very exciting things happening around the world.
Sree, let's start with what is happening with Russia and Ukraine. Russia dominates global headlines with troops near Ukraine border and Russian troops are in Belarus. Sir, with your permission, I'm going to put up the map with a certain amount of information on where things stand right now. So now I'm going to just zoom into Ukraine. So are you able to see it, sir?
I'm able to see, yeah, that's right. You can zoom a little further.
Yeah.
So you can see the proximity of Ukraine from a strategic point of view to Russia and Ukraine's border with Belarus. So both of them have acquired strategic importance within the context of what is happening in Russia and Russia's intent, at least from the perspective of the Americans, and the Europe, that there is an imminent threat of the Ukrainian invasion. That seems to be the scenario. Now, Mr. Vladimir Putin says that, this whole Ukraine saga is something that West built up and West basically intervened and anointed or appointed a puppet government which is hostile towards the Russians. And people forget the fact that there's a significant chunk of Russian-speaking people and Russian sympathetic people within Ukraine. The number ranges from 40 to 44%. So this is the context. And as when Biden administration took over, we started with Nord Stream Pipe 2 issues in terms of whether it meets the sanctions or doesn't meet the sanctions threshold. And we started from there. And then the troubles brewed in Belarus. And then we had issues around the NATO conducting exercises near Black Sea, and that began to build up. So now we are at a situation where there seems to be a confrontation looming between the West and Russia. On one hand, Ukraine says, hey, allow us to deal with the situation and diffuse. On the other hand, there is this dialogue going on. Britain has, stepped into the foray, and it is helping the Ukrainians. It has supplied arms and equipment as well as the clothing. So you got the Ukrainian troops, having practice exercises. It begs the question, in a situation that we are in today, does it really warrant or whether diplomacy can prevail? And this is where, Europe, United States has stepped up the ante. There is a telephonic conversation that has taken place between the Ukrainian president and Mr. Biden. The Republicans have latched on to it and they have asked a question. If you have spoken and if there is nothing confidential, why not you make it public? Okay, please make it public, the transcripts of what took place between the two of you. Remember, there has been issues of going back in time, Russian interference in US elections. There has also been some linkages with Hunter Biden, with Ukraine, and to some extent, to a great extent with China. So it is a potpourri of a whole host of issues, plus in conjunction with this looming issue that has been discovered by the present set of rulers, both in Europe as well as in United States.
Sridharji, I don't know if you can see my mouse, but I'm pointing towards Donetsk, which is the area that Russia appears to be eyeing. And if you remember, Biden let it slip that if Russia were to take a small slice of Ukraine, then the amount of sanctions might be less as opposed to a full scale invasion. Now, Biden says that he will move US troops, about 8,000, to Eastern Europe, and the NATO countries are near term. And as tensions are escalating with Russia, now we are seeing that even Germany, which was sort of sitting at on the fence, has sent 2,000 helmets. And that's kind of laughable why they would send 2,000 helmets to start with to Ukraine when others, such as Britain and other countries, are sending much substantial arms and ammunition. So Ukrainian troops are now training with new British arms amid these tensions with Russia. Putin says West has not addressed key security concerns of Russia. Sridharji, perhaps you can recap what exactly does Russia want? After all, Ukraine is not even a NATO member, and it may have wanted to join NATO, but I think NATO is not ready to accept them. What exactly were the reasons why NATO has not accepted Ukraine, and what are the concerns of Russia, sir?
The concerns of Russia are grant of NATO membership to the old Eastern Bloc countries like Poland, Romania, etc. Once you come under the NATO, then automatically there is basis, as well as in Poland, there is discussions going on around a shield. So what Russia is saying is, if you put that map, you will see that there is an inner radius of the Baltic states, which is Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia. Then as you kind of slip further, then you're going into, the old Eastern Bloc. So what they're saying is in my western borders, as well as in Black Sea, which is a very important naval submarine base for the Russians, you have people snooping over what I am doing. And given the past history of how the Russian Federation was, or the USSR was broken, he has suspicion whether there are any further attempts by the West to interfere in Russia. So this is the security guarantee that he is seeking, which is NATO will have no footprint along its borders or around the nations which form the old Eastern Bloc. That they would, including Croatia, Poland, Slovakia, Georgia on the southern side. So they're saying we don't want you to be snooping here, and you stay where you are, and that's the security guarantee that the Russians are demanding. And I don't think NATO is going to budge. Germany, as you rightly pointed out, even talking about sending troops into Lithuania. There's a talk of discussion going on whether there should be some German troops in Lithuania. And the reason being that, whether Lithuania will come under attack because of the China-Russia nexus. Lithuania is one country in the world, along with probably Poland. Lithuania is most conspicuous, where they have given the embassy kind of a status to Taiwan, for which China is not very happy about. So the question, therefore, is whether Russia will show some sympathy towards the Chinese, and hence you have the Germans stepping in. So you can see that this has now become a geopolitical play. And to your specific question, this is the security guarantee that Russia is seeking from the West, that NATO will not have bases around, commencing from Poland, will not have bases around, and will not be conducting exercises in its waters, and provide that security guarantee that prevailed until recently.
As US seeks UN meeting with Russia and Ukraine, Russia says that it will veto the meeting. And Lithuania and Germany, like you said, are in talks with the possibility of more German troops in Lithuania, considering the developing situation across the border. Sridharji, senior US officials are visiting Lithuania to show support over Chinese coercion. Chinese ambassador warns that support of Taiwanese independence could spark US and China military conflict. What do you think was the trigger for Lithuania to announce what it did? Do you think the US might have said, wink, wink, nod, nod, you do this, we will cover your back, sir?
Well, I think there are two reasons. First and foremost, Taiwan has been investing in Lithuania. And also, I think China has been developing strategic partnerships with nations that are sympathetic and extending diplomatic ties with a number of nations. Remember, the Taiwan foreign minister has made extensive trips around Europe. He just concluded, visited the US delegation, and he's going back. Remember, Taiwan is also building a strategic partnership with India, where it is going to have investment and a semiconductor plant. So Taiwan is adopting a dual approach, which is namely, it is going to preserve its independence, not sovereignty. It's never claimed a national status by developing partnerships with many nations. Remember, Honduras is another nation in Latin America, whereas the Venezuelans and Chileans, if I'm, both those nations, which historically had switched their allegiance from Taiwan to China in this diplomatic war that is going on. So Lithuania has much more strategic interest and wants to be independent and wants to have its foray. What did China do? China punished Lithuania in the month of December. Close to 90% of the reduction in exports which Lithuania makes to China was reduced by 90%. They did not impose trade barriers, but what they did, they subtly exerted pressure locally, and the local business people said, we will not impose, we will not export from nations, import from nations which are hostile to China. This is why this issue is going to WTO. But let's kind of where we were and where we are. When you look at Trump's period, everything was quiet because Trump said, you want NATO, you want me to be part of NATO, you need to pay money, and I'll have limited troops. You look after yourself, there's no strategic threat, Russia is going, you guys are doing gas deal, etc. So everything was calm and quiet in Europe up until then. Trump left, then Biden came in. We conducted exercises. We said we are going to expand the footprint. We are going to invest more money into NATO. These are the strategic allies. To ruffle the feathers, we said we still have a Russian threat harping from the 2016 elections. We ruffle the feathers. So this is what has resulted in the present mess that we are in, the continuation of the old Obama policy, which we are seeing in the Biden administration. So why there is a lull and why there is sudden flurry of activity and the switching of the efforts from South China into Russia is because we are beginning to flex our muscles. This is United States, flex our muscles in, which is most unwarranted at this point of time.
Australia will seek to be included in consultations about the trade dispute between Europe and China launched by the EU at the WTO, says Australian Trade Minister. I'm trying to connect the importance of Australia in these negotiations, Sridharji. Why do you think Australia wants to be part of that?
Australia joined the world in, first it became part of the Quad, if you recall. Then it began to put conditions on human rights. It stopped the Chinese from actively engaging in political interference in the Australian system, number two. And number three, it said that it needs to have fair and just policies as far as the trade is concerned. Eyed and ruffled by Australia's provocative behavior, according to the Chinese, they started to put trade restrictions and trade tariffs on Australian imports, the imports from Australia or exports from Australia. Wine, barley, coal. coal is one of the biggest sources of export from Australia into China. China began to look for alternative markets, including Indonesia. So the story, what happened is, so Australia is saying that trade is an international rules-based system. EU, what happened to Lithuania has happened to me 3 years ago. So let me now join with you and make the case as to China imposes these coercive measures in getting its policy done. Now, remember, guys, we have been talking about DGI. We have been saying this on this debt and trap policy of Chinese. This is another measure that is coming into, which is the coercive trade practices and coercive diplomatic pressure that China is using, besides active media interference, is what is causing this problem. And also, Australia was one of the few countries which stood up and said, along with United States has been very passive, especially under the present regime, that there needs to be a full-fledged investigation into the origins of the COVID, and there has to be an objective, and there has to be, if required, reparations. This is going back to the old Trump policy. So Australia is saying, I got punished for this, so I want to be part of the WTO discussions.
And US Navy is working to recover an F-35A plane that fell into the South China Sea after a landing mishap. 7 military personnel were hurt in the incident. It was the second crash in over 2 months. Sridharji, what really do you think happened here? Was there some sort of a routine thing that went wrong, or was something more that was happening there?
One has to guess. This is the second incident in less than 2 months, or 2 months plus. This is again the same F-35. Now, whether there is a fault with the plane, or whether it is a hostile area, which is namely infested with both the US, the allies, and the Chinese, maneuvers that are going on in the South China Sea. Whether it's a result of that is anybody's guess. But the fact is that the second plane has crashed. It is also a fact that there is a massive hunt going on, both by the Chinese, probably Russians, and the Americans, to recover this plane. The reason being the strategic importance of this is supposed to be our United States' most advanced aircraft. So there is a mission that is going on. But we have seen quite a few incidents, a US carrier bumping into what is called as either a nuclear bunker or some bunker. We have seen mishaps. We have seen planes coming close to each other. We have also seen 2 mishaps that we just reported, the second one being this. So there's a lot of hostile activity going on. Whether it is an accident, whether it is a provocative incident, we don't know. But clearly something has happened. And this is confirmed by the US Defense Forces.
And Representative Ron Johnson says that the US response to COVID-19 has been an abject failure, as active cases in the US rise to 28 million. That is almost 1 in 10 now. Plus, there is a new version of Omicron that is being detected across all states. Sridharji, what is this new variant? And it seems to have a much higher fatality rate?
No, the new variant is some this Omicron B.A.2. This is B.A.1. It just seems to have a very faster propagation. Travels by air. So that's why there's a very high incidence. All you need to do is look at the numbers in Europe. It's astonishing. The rise in numbers in many of the smaller nations, UK, France, Germany, Spain, the rise in cases, even Netherlands has got close to 1 million cases, and it is spreading very fast. Though there's not much fatalities, but it does cause inconvenience. It can be dealt with quarantine at home. The new variant that we are alluding to here is what is called as, if I'm correct, Neocov, Neocov. that's been just detected in South Africa, of all places. Now the virus epicenter seems to be not Wuhan, but or China, but seems to be South Africa, where they're talking about fatality of 1 in 3. 1 in 3. Now, this is very, very early data, but let's wait and see. Coming back to United States, we are at an astonishing high. Anybody and everybody whom I speak with, has COVID, has had COVID or has COVID. My own staff, most of them, have had COVID, and it lasted for about 2 weeks. 1 week for them to recover, 1 week further for them to, get past that infectious state or propagation state. So it takes about 2 weeks for these things to get through. I don't know what how the general health and consequences are. It's very early to predict, but this is very high. And guys, if you don't know, in the United States did not even have self-testing kits. So people have to come to your hospital to get yourself tested, whereas most even smaller nations have self-testing kits. So United States, when Ron Johnson talks about abject failure, we have completely mismanaged vaccines. We have mismanaged this mask off, mask on policy. We have no test facilities. Everybody has to come to a hospital or one of these test centers which they have set up, fortunately, but everybody has to go there. So what happens? If you're doing a self-test at home, then you stop the propagation. You go to a concentrated area, you begin to spread. That's what has happened. And let us hope that we can, it's a huge number. Just to give you a number, 375 million people around the world have been affected by COVID, of which today, as we speak, 72 million or 70 plus million active cases, of which 28 million is in United States. So that's 40%. It's a very substantive number. When you take at the population base, something clearly wrong in the United States relative to the rest of the world. That's all we can say. But 375 million, very soon we would be 500. It's a 500 million people affected, and no accountability has been pinned on any nation. And WHO sits like a sitting duck with abject disaster in concert with United States.
And Chinese-made COVID-19 test kits are coming to millions of American households, and this is thanks to government initiative. How did the Biden administration get it so horribly wrong, Sridharji?
Tell me, sir, which one they haven't got it? They got it correct. Which one? Nothing is correct. To add to the disaster, when Mr. Biden was recently in Pittsburgh to talk about infrastructure, just a few hours before, a bridge collapsed. And then he justified by saying, we need the infrastructure without talking anything about the collapse of this bridge. So the story here is that all policies, I'm trying to be a little flippant here, but everything that we touch seems to be a disaster. How did we get it wrong? Well, apparently they gave something to this iHealth, which is a green organization, or which is one of these nonprofits based in California. And they have a deal with Andon or Angon Health. This Angon Health imports test kits, or a subsidiary of a Chinese manufacturing company. So we're going to have about 60 million or 70 million kits sourced from this Chinese company and distributed. We have given, even these masks, we have given distribution to people who have never manufactured a mask in life. So United States, notwithstanding being the most advanced economy, we do lots of things which make people sit up and laugh at us.
There's less transparency and accountability on the spend around the US $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill that was passed last year. It is also alleged that $6.8 billion of that funding was sent overseas. Sridharji, is the 1.2 trillion infrastructure that has not passed the Senate, has it?
It has. This is the 560 billion, which is the 560 plus the additional, that's the 1.2 that got passed in November. You remember that started with they wanted to tie this bill to the $3 trillion build back better, and then the wisdom prevailed, and they basically bifurcated into two. They got it passed. This is the one which is internet, roads, railways, airport, infrastructure, broadband connection, hospitalization, additional COVID testing, and all those kinds of things as part of that bill. So this is the one that got passed. As soon as it gets passed, what happens? Already it is earmarked, and they appointed a czar, Landru. He's not responded to the Senate as to how exactly this money is being dispensed, where it is, but they have come to find out that a lot of money is going overseas. Don't be surprised if the money has gone to some of the hostile or friendly states to United States,
including China.
I don't want to comment without being very specific on the data, but anything is possible. Who knows? Could have gone to Iran. On one side, we are sending something. It could have gone to Afghanistan. It could have gone to Iraq. It could have gone to Palestine. It could have gone to anywhere. We don't know because there has been less transparency. But what is coming out is that there is a tremendous amount of waste that happens when the money is frittered away like this. And we have never seen this type of money. And governments are very poor in distributing as far as cash and being accountable for the schemes.
And former President Donald Trump and his allies say that they are vindicated after a Pennsylvania court struck down the state's no excuse mail-in voting law enacted before the November 2020 presidential election. Sridharji, this was one of the first things you and I discussed, that this is patently illegal. I just can't imagine how this could have passed. But now, finally, a judge has struck it down. But that doesn't mean that Biden will step down as president, does it?
No, it doesn't. So what he's saying is, hey, in November 2020, you considered this valid. In January 2022, you are saying it's illegal. Doesn't add up. So maybe you have to show your book and say, please read the book, Sree. And so I think that that's the situation, which is to say, basically it resulted in harvesting, skimming, all kinds of things. Everybody's sad. The votes were, streamed in. There was no accountability. The whole concept of absentee ballot was for a specific purpose. When you use that as a scheme to conduct an election, then it becomes blatantly illegal. So that is what the court has ruled. But as you rightly say, US is, now just actually become a laughing matter on many, many, many fronts. We just discussed foreign policy. We discussed COVID. We discussed the distribution kits with less transparency around the disbursement of the infrastructure budget. Now the voting law, is running its course.
And besides inflation, with the US fueled by trillions of borrowed spending and low rates, crime rates continue to rise across the country, and illegal immigrants pose a major threat. Again, something that we have been warning all along, Sridharji.
Well, it is. I think just over the weekend we had a mass, participation attending the funeral of the two police officers who were shot in Manhattan. We have witnessed to the rise in the crime rates and the homicides, gone up by 227%. And we even have an attorney general or a DA in Manhattan who thinks that we have to go soft on criminals. And it's quite amazing as to how the situation has deteriorated in the last 12 months or so that there's rising crime rates. Now you come to, the other situation. There's a video which basically shows, which is released by Fox and so on, which shows that how people were smuggled into the country and ferried in buses and planes. And the latest flare-up that has happened is the Border Patrol officers, with Mayorkas fighting as to how TSA can allow people with warrants flying on planes. This is some of them with, illegal category on the top of the head. So you can begin to see that we are now in a state of complete chaos, not just on economics, law and order, health, politics, conduct of elections, and we still have the January 6th inquiry committee going on. Still, they're trying to figure out something. And we will probably have a special feature with myself and Sree on what is happening to 𝗣𝗂𝘂𝘀𝘀𝘀 investigation on the 2016 elections. Some fascinating revelations will come out as we'll do that on a separate show.
Absolutely, and we are getting all the information for you viewers, so that will be out in a few days. Iconic buildings to be lit up both in Israel and India as both nations celebrate 30 years of establishment of ties with fanfare. Sridharji, I must mention here that the first place for issuing visas to go to Israel took place in Dr. Subramanian Swami's house. They put a flag in front of it, and that became the temporary consulate for issuing visas. A very interesting way in which they went about doing this. So your thoughts, sir? I think since then, the relationship between Israel and India has only improved over time.
Thanks to Dr. Swami, thanks to his vision, and thanks to his support, Israel and India have remained, very, very strong partners, notwithstanding some, cold relationship that prevailed because of the so-called non-aligned silliness that prevailed in India. It's great that the two countries are coming together, and Naftali Bennett is going to be in India very soon to commemorate the relationship. And they have been a very big ally and supporter both on the defense side as well as on the agricultural side. Lot of productivity that one sees in the agro sector is a result of some of the work that the Israelis have done with centers of excellence established in quite a few states.
And Prime Minister Modi hosts a virtual summit with 5 Central Asian countries with emphasis on security and trade: Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, and Turkmenistan. Sridharji, this is all good news. How much of this is going to impact what is happening in and around Afghanistan?
Well, I think that what they're trying to do is it's like a top-down, bottoms-up approach, right? So, which is on one side you have this strategic partnership with Russia, right? This S-400. You have Biden making a statement, which is namely to say Russia is proliferating arms and creating unwarranted tensions. There was a statement that was released by him, but he doesn't want to antagonize India. So what Prime Minister Modi is doing is, okay, now you got Ukraine. We showed the map of Ukraine, Belarus, Moldova, Georgia, right? Kazakhstan, and right above Azerbaijan. Then you have the 5 Central Asian states. If, for example, India doesn't have the strategic partnership, the Caspian Sea is right around that area. So if you take a look at the 5 states, they are a very important kind of a strategic pivot, especially after United States vacated in its base in Central Asia. It's a very big blunder committed by United States. It was a buffer that provided within Central Asia against the Chinese. It had kept a close eye. So India necessarily has to have a warm partnership, which is both security as well as trade. Close to 72 million people live in the 5, what you call the Central Asian states. The economies go somewhere between $600 to $1 trillion. But more than trade, it is this security, and it provides the umbrella. Remember, again, when India had to vacate, it was Uzbekistan and Tajikistan which helped India to maneuver its planes out of Afghanistan into India. It couldn't do it through, obviously, the other states. So it's an important within that context. It also provides Modi a buffer in the international arena, to dialogue. If there's only one person who can dialogue with Vladimir Putin and drive some sense, and that is Prime Minister Modi. Who knows? He may play a role in diffusing the Ukrainian tensions, because neither EU nor Mr. Boris Johnson nor Mr. Biden are in any position China is not, these nations are not going to approach China to be what you call a mediator. They're not going to approach Turkey to be a mediator. So who is left with? It is probably India, which will probably mediate and probably diffuse the tensions. By virtue, it still holds one of the 15 permanent members. It has a temporary permanent membership. Plus, it also has access to Mr. Putin.
India inching towards trade agreement with the UK. Indian exports rise across merchandise, manufacturing, and agro sectors, auguring well for the economy. Now, UK, United Kingdom, has a challenge on its hands because it has exited Brexit. So there were some committed markets that it could ship into. Those have gone away. Now it has to start from scratch. So this is good that Britain is going to come with more of an equal or perhaps a lesser partner to India than what it might have in the past. That's how I see it, Sridharji. Your thoughts?
Oh, you're absolutely correct. I think India is now a big market. And India and UK kind of flip depending on the currency rates as to which is a bigger economy. But from a market size point of view, India is huge. When you look at the future, it is huge. It's also a strategic buffer when you look at the hostile relationship between UK and China. So I think UK is now much more in a palatable mode. The present regime, which is Boris Johnson and the Conservatives, are much more aligned with India. What happens should Labour come to power is an entirely different point.
And a year after junta takeover in Myanmar, the military grip continues. Cambodian Prime Minister Mr. Hun Sen urges junta to allow humanitarian aid and a representative from the ASEAN to visit Myanmar. Sridharji, with your permission, I'm going to put up the map so people you can talk to the map, sir. That's where Myanmar is.
Yeah. Well, I think Myanmar is strategic, in a strategic location as far as India is concerned and ASEAN is concerned. Myanmar is also strategic because it is adjacent to Laos and Cambodia. Both are, particularly Cambodia, is communist sympathetic. So they do not want Myanmar slipping into Russia and China and potentially creating a problem. So the junta, the Cambodian Prime Minister is trying to keep Myanmar in the fray. Fortunately, ASEAN, on one hand, trying to be what I call non-hostile, but at the same time firm, is saying that it wants to solve Myanmar issue through dialogue and its own ASEAN ministerial conference. There is a meeting that is being scheduled for February, featuring top on the list is how do we resolve the Myanmar issue.
And the Philippines formally signs the BrahMos order with India and to acquire 3 batteries to be placed onshore as a weapon of strategic deterrence. Sridharji, I'm putting up the Philippines map on the world, so you can talk to it, sir.
Yes, Spratly Islands is the centerpiece of the issue. 𝗣𝗂𝘂𝘀𝘁𝘀, which is not too far from Spratly. And there's been a persistent and constant, distractions between Philippines and China on that specific area. So now what they're saying is, okay, yeah, our fisher trawlers are attacked. You're trying to encourage. Okay, no problem. We now have this hypersonic missile capability, which may have a shorter radius of 200 miles, but that's good enough for me. In case you do something to me, I will do something back to you. I think I did attend and listen to General Ravi Shankar's session on the BrahMos missiles and the important. I mean, he's made the point, which is not his whole objective is you want to attack. I am capable of inflicting equal damage to you as well. So it is a strategic deterrent, so the people don't flex the muscles. And I think it has done the right thing. It also augurs well for India because India now has some form of a footprint into the South China Sea. I think we may see something happening with Indonesia along the same lines. India and Japan has a strategic partnership. India and Taiwan has a strategic partnership. Remember, the chief of the defense services did visit Taiwan, and the chief of the armed forces did visit Taiwan. So there is, that. There's also a partnership between Korea and India. So it augurs well from that point of view that India is getting its defense footprint around the region, which is of significant maritime importance.
Iran nuclear discussions continue with IAEA amid no breakthrough. It is highly unlikely in the present situation, or so it looks like. 1 week after the first attack on the United Arab Emirates, Yemen's Iran-backed Houthis fired ballistic missiles at Abu Dhabi and Dubai, and both attempts were foiled in escalating signs of tension. Sridharji, this is something that seems to be new. Why is Iran now picking up fights, sir?
The triple I is something that we covered: Iran, Iraq, and Israel. Who is the strategic partner of Israel? UAE. And who is the strategic partner of Saudi Arabia? UAE. So you want to flex your muscle, you flex your muscle around the areas of vulnerability. So which is the area of vulnerability? UAE. That's what they thought. But remember, UAE is also home to US Air Base. So, I think the US has provided the security cover, and they will choose soft targets to flex their muscles and come to the negotiating table. The UAE has not been very sympathetic to the Iranian cause, but they want them to be much more, less hostile, but that's not going to happen, as we all know. So I think what you're beginning to see is that Iran, Iraq, Syria, that specific group, including Lebanon, they will try to flex their muscles wherever there is either an Israeli footprint or wherever there is a Saudi extension of a partnership. That is what you're beginning to see. It's quite astonishing that they have picked up Abu Dhabi and Dubai, where you can see a lot of economic activity. And if people are not aware, UAE is now right sitting between Abu Dhabi and Dubai, is a major venue for Expo 2020. Expo 2020 is where all the major nations have stalls and promoting the global trade. Which is the location to showcase and pick? Abu Dhabi and Dubai, where you have the Expo 2020. So that could be another reason.
And Kenya beefs up security after warnings of possible attacks by the Al-Shabaab group from Somalia. The other parts of West Africa also continue to be under Islamic jihadi threat in new signs of escalation. Sahel, S-A-H-E-L, Sridharji.
Indeed, the Sahara extended region is now back in contention. Why? Kenya, because Kenyans worked with United States and allies in going after the Somali. That's where the Al-Shabaab terrorist group was based in. And remember, again, we have covered this in our daily Global Insights. We have done an extensive coverage. But from West Africa to East Africa, we have trouble brewing. And now, after we repeatedly referring to it last year, you are now beginning, the world is now taking notice and saying, hey, I think there seems to be some reality here. And they have become points of, again, there's no democracy. There's a lot of influx of, feudalism and infights between various tribes. There's been persistence, both Western interference and influence. There's also the Chinese footprint. And these have become the basis and the homes over a period of 8 years, somewhere between 2008 to 2016, when the Al-Qaeda and Islamic State was formed during this particular period. All of them took shelter in this region because they were points of less interference and more vulnerability.
And to conclude, the world continues to battle COVID with no let-up in new viruses and infections, and these are all growing at an alarming rate. Do join us again in a week's time, and please support us when we are going to come out with regional language versions of our weekly Global Insights program. Sridharji, as always, a pleasure sharing your thoughts, sharing thoughts with you on what happened around the world, sir. We'll be back again bright and early in a week's time. Until then, stay tuned. Namaskar.
Namaskar. Thank you so much. And we'll see you all next Sunday.